What's up, guys? Welcome back to the shop. In today's video we're gonna be trying out something new. I'm doing a pretty low layer bold pattern on this one, and I learned a lot in the process, so let's get to it. First thing I'm gonna do is weld up my billet. It consists of about 7 layers, if I'm not mistaken. It might be 6, but I'm pretty sure it's 7. And with our billet welded up, I'm spraying it down with some WD-40 just to help protect it while it is in the forge. So we're going to start with a couple of presses and a couple of passes on the hydraulic press to make sure everything's welded nicely. It is very soft. It got up pretty hot inside of the forge, and so the press is doing quick work of the steel. And if you're new to the channel, hello, what's up? And if you're not, you're wondering why it is so bright, and that's because I kind of tweaked with the settings on the camera, and I turned some lights off hoping I would get a better shot, and it was a little bit worse than usual. But hey, I learned my lesson and I will not do that again. And continuing with the build, I am doing something called crushing in the corners, and I'm doing this to create a C pattern inside the billet. So pretty much I put it on a 45-degree diagonal and I crush those corners in, and then I re-square it to those corners, and I make sure that I'm essentially just turning it back into a square, but by pressing in the corners, if that makes any sense. One of the things that I did realize during this build is how much of a pain it is to kind of keep track of what is my new corner and what isn't, especially after the initial press, because it turns into like a bit of a circle. I was gonna say ball, it's not a ball, it's a circle, and at that point it's very easy to mess up, and instead of re-squaring it, all you do is crush in the corners and then pretty much square it back to what it was originally, which kind of defeats the purpose. So I believe moving forward, I know I've already started another project where I'm doing this, and I'm using square tubing. That way I know when I re-square it, my holding stick is at a diagonal to the new square. That's just an idea I came up with for this next project. So I'm prepping up my surfaces, getting it ready for cutting it into equal squares and then restacking the billet, pretty much putting it in a certain order. That way I can do crushed W's versus just making C's. And I'll show you how I do that here in a minute. And with the pieces cut, I'm putting it into some ferric chloride. That way I can match up the faces as best I can to get a nice and flowing pattern in the design. Alright guys, so I've gone on ahead and etched them, and you can't really see it. I'm not sure if you can see it on camera. It's a pretty crappy etch. I think my etchant cup was dirty whenever I put my ferric chloride in it, and it just gave me a crappy etch. But here in person, I can actually see the pattern is going this way, this way, this way, this way. So I'm sure that's what they call making W's. So I haven't done this before. I'm just giving it my first attempt. Though I am doing a very low layer count, and that is because I am trying to do like a stacked low layer twist. I just want to see what it looks like. I wanted to have nice bold colors, so that's why I'm going this route. But we're going to go ahead and make some W's, and then we'll probably crush them the other way again. I'm not really looking for a mosaic type pattern. I'm just looking for a lot of movement because I want to see a lot of movement in the pattern. So we're going to go on ahead and weld this together and put it back into the forge, and we'll go from there. One quick thing before I go on ahead and weld this is that I have everything labeled. Whenever I cut it, I labeled wherever my cut joints were at. So here we have 2 and 2, we have 4 and 4, and here we have 3 and 3. So that's literally where I cut them. Well, I cut them here, here, and here so I can have my 4. And the reason why I did that is so that the pattern can match up as best as possible. Like I said, it's really hard to see here, but the pattern's in there. And so the 2 faces that are touching are the faces that were cut together. So they're going to match as best as I could possibly match them. and hopefully they'll blend in well. But yeah, that's one of the things that I did to make sure that everything matched up as nicely as I could. And hopefully that helps the pattern not look too janky once I have everything forge welded up. So now we're gonna forge weld the stacked pieces, and what this is gonna do is weld those C's into W's so they kind of cross from one side to the other, and they make a very cool wavy pattern throughout the steel. Now this is probably my second or third time ever doing this. I never really delved much into this because it takes a lot more time than my regular Damascus builds, and because I'm trying to keep a steady pace, I kind of avoid taking all these extra steps. Normally on another build I would do a much higher layer count, but I kind of avoided it for this build, and so that would give me the ability to be able to do this project faster. It did not, so next time I'm gonna go with some higher layer patterns to get a lot more detail in there. So with those W's made, I'm going ahead and do the crushing again on the corners, and that is gonna get the pattern to move around a lot more on the inside. This is that circle step where I say that it's kind of really easy to get mistaken and press on the wrong corners, and I won't lie, I definitely took a while in between pressing and trying to make sure I'm definitely following the right route by checking the ends of the billet, because the ends always split, and when they split you can kind of tell which way the grain of the steel is going, so that helps out. But the finer the pattern gets on the end, the more likely you are to kind of make that mistake. I know a lot of makers do this on a regular, so if you do mosaics and you do a lot of crushed W's and C's, let me know in the comments down below what trick you use to not, mess it up. Alright guys, so here are the pieces that I cut, and the ends are looking pretty nice. And so originally I was gonna four-way this like so ish and forge weld it together with the intention of forge welding it together, but now that I see it, I kind of like it. So instead of doing this route and going with the twist, I'm gonna stack them. I'm gonna find where the patterns meet up the best, stack them, and I'm gonna forge weld them one more time, and then I'm gonna just cut a chunk off and forge a knife from that. I think that would be the best route to go with this, and we're gonna throw out the other idea, and maybe we'll touch that up in the future with a different steel. But I'm liking the way this pattern is running. Originally I had checked out these guys, and these etched a little bit better. You can see them a little bit better. So these are the end pieces, and they flow pretty nicely together. Obviously I have to make sure they match up correctly. I think this guy goes here. And they match up pretty nicely and they follow along. And I think that would make a pretty interesting pattern with the big bold lines going through it. So this is pretty much what I'm gonna run for. So I'm gonna clean up. First I'm gonna figure out how I want it to flow. Then I'm gonna clean up in between and forge weld them together. It is a bit risky because it is pretty tall. And originally I did not have the intention of doing this. I was gonna four-way it. That's why I have about 3/4 by 3/4 blocks. But because of the change in idea, I'm gonna have to risk forge welding it like that, versus if I had originally planned to do that, I would have made them more rectangle versus square, just because it's a lot easier to stack. So that's the route we're gonna go. We're switching everything over, but I think this is gonna give us a really nice result, so we're gonna go that route. So on this particular weld, I did not show spraying the WD-40 on there, but I do spray it on every single weld. Every time I put something into the forge that is high layers and needs to be welded, I always spray the WD-40 as extra protection, because you can't ever be too safe, especially at this point. This is already my third forging session on this piece, and fortunately it was going pretty well. Alright guys, so we've cut up the billet. I just cut off the ends that weren't really going to be usable, and if I keep this on, I'm going to run the risk of, one, introducing this mild steel from where I did my weld beads, and that two, it would probably split. So we cut these ends off and we're left with right around 4.5-ish inches by 1 inch by 2.25, I believe. So I cut those in half, and this is what the pattern is looking like on the inside. I'm not really sure if the camera's picking it up well, but I'm liking the way it's looking. So now what I'm gonna do is I'm actually going to forge this downward, and this is gonna be the face of my knife. So this is gonna expand this way and expand the other way, and we're gonna forge it all the way down, and hopefully it doesn't split. So the welds look pretty good, so I'm gonna work it hot, and I'm gonna cross my fingers and hope it doesn't split, and if it does, then got backup right here. Overall, I am happy with the way it's looking. It's looking kind of like almost like a zebra pattern type thing, which is, I was looking for a very low layer, high contrast. I didn't want something very, very high layer, just to try it out. I was originally gonna do it with the twist, but I changed my mind. I think this is gonna look a lot cooler. Ooh, it looks a little bit better. And these first three matched up pretty good. This one is kind of matched up, kind of moved around, I'm not sure. So I'll probably use this end as my tang, and then the rest for my actual steel. So I'll be welding on my hold stick here, and I'll be forging it downward, and fingers crossed it does not split. So this is easily the scariest part of this build. I can easily wreck it. It could tear apart, and it could ruin all of the progress, but fortunately it holds pretty well. It does have some points where it starts to tear. Here I'm cleaning off the steel, and I'm chasing a little bit of a tear on one of the joints, and I'm trying to hammer it back in, see if it will weld back up or if I need to grind it. Eventually I do give up, and I take it to the grinder, and I'm holding it with 2 tongs because it is still scary hot. Probably a good solid 700-800 degrees, even though it doesn't really look like it in the video. It's still very hot, and I try to grind out the little crack that I have on there. With it sufficiently grind, I take it back to the hydraulic press, and I work it down even further. At this current point, the steel is at about 1/2 inch thick, and I'm using my hand hammer just to start forging in the tip of the knife. Since it wouldn't be out of the ordinary if it rips, I'm trying to forge the profile of the knife while it's still relatively thick. That way I can kind of avoid overstressing it. Though if you look closely, you can definitely see a little bit of opening happening on the edges of the billet, and those are the weld sections where I welded the 4 pieces originally. One thing that I would do differently moving forward is I would definitely clean up my billet a lot. I would go back through and make sure I got rid of any possible cracks or anything that could possibly crack. I didn't do that on this build, and that's one of those things where I try to get ahead of myself and try to save time thinking, it won't affect it in the long run. It always does. Alright guys, so I ran out of time on my last forging session, so this is as far as we got. I did stop also because I have this little minor problem right here. And what I gotta do is I'm just gonna grind a quick little notch there. And also, I don't know if you can see right here where my finger's at. I have a very small one. I'm not sure if it's just scale buildup or if it's also a notch. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna notch it in here, and hopefully I can run that crack out of the way, and then we can have a nice clean steel to work with. So this is pretty much the joint, and I had another joint right here. So that's why I have these cracks. But I'm gonna divide probably about this much of it. Probably good 2 inches by 1.25 inches. I'm gonna divide that, and that's gonna become my hidden tang, and the rest I'm gonna see how big of a knife I can get out of it. It's gonna be a pretty big slicer, but I know there's a lot of people that like big slicers, and I haven't made one in a while, so definitely gonna see how much I can get to. This guy is still a 1/4 inch thick, so it's plenty thick, and we're gonna hand forge the majority of it and make sure we can get as much out of the steel as we can get. This same spot that I'm grinding here is the same spot that was giving me trouble while I was forging it. And even though I ground it originally while it was still kind of hot, it definitely wasn't enough, and it started to split once again. Off camera, I tried multiple times with flux and with the hammer, and I tried to reforge weld that seam down, but it still kept opening up, so I ended up just giving up and grinding it down some more. So here I'm forging in the tang, and once I have it separated, I go to the hydraulic press to get most of the heavy work done, and then I go back to the hand hammer to straighten everything out and get it roughly where I want it. While I do like to hand forge as much as I can, I'm definitely not going to be wasting time trying to do all of it by hand when I have a 15-ton press right there to move the steel for me. And with the tang pretty much set, I'm going in with my cross peen, and I'm trying to get as much width as possible. I went for length over width at the beginning, and so I couldn't bring as much width as I wanted down. I like my knives being around 2 inches at the heel. This one was about 1.75 inches once I finished, maybe a little bit less. And though it is enough to not crush your knuckles on a cutting board, it's still not really my favorite, but you work with what you got. Or should I say you work with what you gave yourself, because I gave myself that much steel to work with there. On another note, I'm definitely going to start looking for a really good vise, maybe a leg vise, because on this knife particularly, and on other knives, I don't really hammer in the choil area where your hand meets the knife, and that is because I don't really have anywhere where I can really grasp it well to kind of force it down. So I definitely want to get me a good vise, that way I can clamp it in there and hit it in there with my cross peen. That way I don't have just that swoop curve that I have going from the handle into the edge, and I can have a little bit more of a concave instead of a convex area. So while I was forging it, I kind of decided it needed a bit of a drop point towards the front. So I went on ahead and did that, and I think it is more aesthetically pleasing, and it lets me grind that tip a lot thinner, and it builds down to a very thin tip, which helps with the cutting and the precision cutting on the tip area. But all that reasoning aside, I definitely did it just because it looks cool towards the tip. So here I'm outlining pretty much where I want everything to go. Even though I notched it, I didn't really forge it well on the edge, so I'm gonna have to just get rid of all that extra steel. I didn't really like the way it ended up, but I was also afraid to make that area worse than it already was, if that makes any sense. But unfortunately, I didn't have to take too much material off, and I pretty much just ground an outline to the actual shape of the knife. And thankfully, because of that, I don't have to distort the pattern too much by grinding off too much material from it. On another note, I definitely have been using my worn out belts more and more in the last few videos because I had not had the chance to order new belts. But the other day I did some shopping around and I ended up ordering a whole bunch of belts in bulk from Combat Abrasives. I thought it was a pretty good deal, though it was pretty expensive because I had to buy a lot in one go. But hopefully that will hold me up for the next few months. And truthfully, there's nothing like grinding with a nice fresh belt, especially on the finished grind. When the steel is already hardened, the difference between a brand new belt and a worn out belt can lead to hours and hours of extra grinding and a lot more fatigue by sitting on that grinder, grinding my life away. Alright guys, so the knife has been ground. I do have minor little spots like here and further down over here where I have little tiny pieces of scale, but those will come out on the finished grind. We still got plenty of thickness on the edge and plenty of thickness on the spine to work with. So it's time to cycle it through a couple times. The pattern should come out on the cycles. You can kind of see it already trying to peek through the parts that are starting to oxidize faster than the other ones. You don't really see it on this side because this is the side I ground last. But overall, it's coming out pretty nice. It is overall going to be right over, let's see, about 10.5 inches. I wanted to make it longer on the heel. The heel is about 1 3/4. I really like my knives to be a little bit taller than that on the heel, ideally 2 1/4, 2.5 ish, but I just couldn't distribute the metal correctly on this one. Overall, it's a pretty nice knife. It is more of a Western chef versus anything else that I've made, and it's gonna have a really nice rocking motion. And overall, it's gonna be a pretty nice knife. Now I got a lot of material to take off. It's still pretty hefty, and I still don't have a handle for it. So we got a lot of work to do, but for now we're going to go on ahead and start prepping it up for our heat treat. So one of the steps I never show is the cycling of the knife, and here I just brought it up to about 1500 degrees and then I let it cool down. It's real cool to see how that pattern starts popping up from the way it cools down and oxidizes and that bit of scale forms up. It really does a nice job of revealing the pattern that's in the Damascus. Alright guys, so we're out of the quench. I haven't tempered it yet. I'll let it cool down between quench plates, and I've gone on ahead and gotten any of the extra oil off of it, and I'm gonna go on ahead and use these guys right here. If you don't know what this is a hardness tester. It costs like 60-70 bucks. I don't know, I bought it a few years ago. And what it is, it's a whole bunch of small files, and these small files are all different hardnesses: 65, 60, 55, 50, 45, 40. And so we're going to take the hardest one, which is this one, the 65 Rockwell, and we're just going to see if it bites onto the knife. If it bites, that means it is softer than the file. In this case, the file isn't touching it, so it's over 65. So in case you're wondering, this is a good way to check. Another way to check is with some very expensive machinery that I do not own and probably won't own for a good while, and that'll give you a more accurate test. But if you want to make sure, you know, this is a more accurate way to check than just a regular file, because, you know, you can check roughly the hardness of the steel and you can make sure that it's hardened. Just to make sure that it's hardened, you can just get a file on it, and if it sounds like glass, then you're hard. But if not, and you want to check more accurately, you got these guys, and then we can also check it after the temper, see it should be somewhere between the 60 and the 65. So 65 should bite on it just a little bit, and the 60 should pretty much skate on it. That's what I'm going for. That'll give me a pretty good basis for my knife. All right, guys, so we are back from our temper. As you can see, I have a little bit of scratch marks here for where I was testing it, but we have our 65 Rockwell, which is what I had showed you previously. See if it'll focus. And it bites it, but just barely. But you can hear the difference in the sound. It's actually biting into it versus before where it would completely skid on it like glass. So we know we're right underneath 65. I'm going ahead and try it. This is a 60 Rockwell. So this should move a lot easier. Pretty much just skid on top, which is what it's doing. It's not really biting much. So we know we're somewhere in the upper, well, somewhere between 60 and 65, more towards 60 than 65. But it's still above 60, so it still skates and it can barely touch it. So that means we got a nice hardenable steel. So we're good. We got a nice hardened blade. So next thing we're going to do, we're going to start working on our finished grind. Now, it's really hard to see because it loses focus. But I do have a tiny bit of a warp towards the tip of the blade. Sure, if you can't really tell, but I can tell in person. So we got a tiny bit of a warp. I'm gonna straighten it out with the cross peen, and pretty much the rest of it came out nice and straight, which I'm very happy about. So we're going ahead and clean it up, straighten it out with our carbide peen, and then we'll figure it out from there. So once the knife is hardened, you really can't straighten it out through traditional methods. Here I'm using a carbide peen hammer, and what that does is it has a little ball of carbide which is extremely hard, and it's harder than what the hardness of the steel is. So whenever I hit it, it creates a little divot that pretty much dishes it out and forces it to bend in the other direction, and that helps straightening out the knives. I've had this hammer for about a year, and it is definitely a game changer. You can buy it online, or you can make it yourself. You can make it yourself. You can make it for like a tenth of the price, maybe 15% of the price, but it's definitely worth every penny if you buy it already made. It has been one of the most important tools in my arsenal as of late, and that is because if you try to force it, either by force or by shim tempering it or by shimming it and forcing it, it runs the risk of breaking the knife in half, cracking it, weakening it, and so on and so forth. And it is the easiest way I've found of pretty much doing it at no risk. Now, if you overdo it and you keep forcing it and forcing it and forcing it, it will eventually break. So definitely keep that in mind. But for the most part, you can correct minor warps fairly easily. But with that little bit of information out of the way, I am grinding in the spine of the knife. I always make sure to round it over as much as possible. One, because it makes it a lot more comfortable, and because it definitely takes away the chances of you accidentally cutting yourself on the edge. Afterwards, I move on to hand sanding, which I absolutely hate. Alright guys, so we're done with our hand sand. Got it up to 800 grit, and we're going to start working on our handle. So for the handle, I got this piece of stabilized walnut. It's very nice patterning figuring in there. Once we grind it in, it has the grain crossing this way. And I think it's going to look really nice. We're going to pair it up with this piece of stabilized, I believe it's dyed poplar burl, or maybe it's some kind of burl that's dyed black. And we're going to pair these two up. I think it's going to look pretty good. And we're going to get started on that. So as of late, I've been doing a lot more hidden tang handles versus full tang. And one of the primary reasons is because I suck at doing hidden tangs. And the best way to get over sucking at it is by doing it a whole bunch and getting a little bit better every time you do it. Here I'm using a 7/16 drill to drill in my initial holes, and then I go towards the back with a 1/4 inch drill, and I drill almost all the way through. I like to keep about a 3/8 thickness, and I like to keep that there. That way it holds everything nice and sturdy. And then I go in with files and I file that to the exact size of the knife. Obviously this is one way to do it. It is not the end all be all. A lot of people have mills, and that makes it a lot faster and a lot more accurate. Even here with files and using a smaller drill bit than the thickness of my knife, it is still very easy to over file and over grind, or maybe just have your drill bit move a little bit and it creates a little bit of a gap. I still don't have a perfect fit up whenever I do my knives, so I always end up having to do adjustments with either glue or epoxy, but there's no shame in that. It's not like I'm gonna sell this knife for $10,000. And I don't think I'll ever be making knives that are that expensive or anywhere near that expensive, because honestly, I don't know. I don't think I got the artistic bone in me to sit there for hours and hours working on one thing trying to get it exactly perfect. At the end of the day, I want my knives to be used, and if you make it perfect, it's kind of better just to throw that bad boy on the wall and look at it as a piece of art versus a tool. But that's just my 2 cents. I don't know. For the rest of the handle, I just make a big hole, and then I put it all together with CA glue, and that helps me get a very nice, easy, quick fit up. When the fit up isn't exactly nice and tight, like this one was pretty nice and tight, I will go in there and I will bed the tang. I will fill it in with epoxy and let it pretty much dry to the shape of the tang, and that way it gives it a very nice fit up. In this one I didn't really need it, so I ended up just skipping that step. And so with the handle pretty much prepped, I'm going in and cutting all the excess off, and then going over to my 2x72 and trimming up those cuts, making sure I have a nice clean surface to work on. I always like to scribe lines where I want to do my cutting and my grinding, and I always cut away from the line, always give myself a little bit of meat, and then I go back in and I do the rest of the grinding with the 2x72. As of late, I've been making my handles a little bit smaller than I used to make them. Before, I was afraid of accidentally going and grinding too much into where the hole is that I made for the tang, but I used to make the holes a lot bigger before. Now they don't really take up as much space, so I kind of have a rough idea of where I can grind and where I can't grind, and that has given me the ability of being able to make the handles smaller and more comfortable in the hand. Before, I was making them about 1.25 inches towards the butt of the handle, and now I get them down to 1 inch, and I feel that is a lot more comfortable. Alright guys, so I got the knife right here. It hasn't been etched yet, but I just popped on the handle, and we're gonna go ahead and I've already sharpened it so it's super sharp, and I wanted to do a bit of a cut test. I've had you guys ask for a cut test, so I figure I'd show you guys. So here we got a potato. We're going ahead and just no effort whatsoever. So it goes through a potato pretty easily. And put this to the side. So we're gonna try it on a carrot. Now carrot is pretty hard. Potato is more starchy, but a carrot is pretty hard. And this is probably the biggest carrot that we have there. So I'm gonna just it goes pretty easily. This guy's pretty big. For the record, I am no chef whatsoever. I don't know how to, I have no proper cutting skills at all. But yeah, this guy is stupid sharp, stupid thin. Trying to see if I can cut a very, very tiny sliver. It's pretty thin. I can just drag it right through. It's pretty nice. It does, the food, I want to say it definitely does stick a little bit. Well, it didn't stick that time, but it does have a little bit of stick. That's because it doesn't have an S grind, though I will be starting S grind soon. See right there? We'll be starting to try out S grind soon to see if I can figure out how to get the good unstick factor. But overall, I am pretty happy and I like the way it cuts. Just quick little drag through. I don't even know. I wonder if I can drag through carrot. I can, but it needs a little bit more force. Carrot's a little bit harder. But as you can tell, I do not have very much experience cutting with a knife. Like, you know, how chefs, they're like it's nothing. I can't do that. I'm very much, I'll cut a finger off. But yeah, you can definitely do fine work. So I hope you're satisfied with that cut test. I've had a couple people tell me they want to see me cut food. So I made this little countertop area. And this is the only place I got good lighting where I can use it. But yeah, definitely, that's a pass for me. And now we move to etching the knife. That way we can reveal that beautiful pattern that's in there. If you like the little cut test, let me know in the comments down below. I'll definitely include that into the videos. And obviously, it was my very first time doing it. Obviously, it was going to be a little crappy and a little janky. But I will get better with it over time. If you like that, let me know in the comments down below. If you didn't, don't let me know. I don't want your negativity in my life. So just praise me, I guess. And a great way to do that is by liking the video if you haven't already, because I know you liked it. I mean, this video is already 30-something minutes long. And if you watched it this far, you obviously liked it. And if you're not subscribed, you should definitely subscribe. Since you're already going up there to hit that like button, the subscribe button is not that far away. Also, hit the bell while you're at it. You're already there anyways. But overall, the glue up was definitely a success. I didn't have to do too much cleaning, which is always a plus. Alright guys, so the knife is done. Before I go and show you the final pictures of it, I want to go over something real quick. So this knife is not going to be for sale, even though I like it and it came out really nice. There's a few things that I'm not really happy with. One, my etch is not coming out right. I don't know why, but the whole of it should be looking like this. And I have some areas that it's almost like darkened and grayed out, and I'm not sure why that is. And I tried to buff it out with a sunshine cloth, and it did nothing to it. So it might be the way I'm mixing my coffee. I'm not quite getting it right. I'm not sure. But that has nothing to do with why I'm not selling it. I'm not selling it because of this delamination right here. Should have gone over it earlier in the video, but I kind of just skipped over it because I was busy trying to get this knife done. But I have a pretty gnarly little delam there that didn't show up until right when I was pretty much done with my finish grind, and then it popped up. So it was actually hidden inside the steel. So this is it's a decent little delam. You can barely feel it, but because of that, I don't feel comfortable selling this knife. It's more of a quality thing. It doesn't really affect the knife in usage or anything. And for the most part, the rest of it is pretty good. I have minor little things that seem like delaminations in certain areas, but none of them are really like as bad as that guy right there. So I'm gonna end up just keeping this knife, probably gifting it to my father, because he looked at it and he liked it. So I'll probably just give it to him, and he can use it. And if something happens to it, then we know that delam actually was, a contributor to it not being a good knife. But nonetheless, I really liked it, so I wanted to finish it and show it to you guys because it looks pretty clean. And overall, I learned a lot making this knife, and stay tuned for the next video. We're going to start trying out some other patterns. But if you want to buy a knife from me, I do have other knives online, so check that out in my website. And this was a pretty long video, but as always, guys, I really appreciate you guys watching. I'll catch you on the next one. Peace.